How's it going, everybody? Handsome Dan here with episode 9 of the Grand Tournament. We're getting to the point where the tournament could end at any second, so I wanted to take some time to thank everyone for tuning in and following along with this event. We've gotten a bunch of new subscribers recently, and while that wasn't my original goal, it means a lot to me that folks are interested enough to keep on watching. If you're just joining us, make sure you check out the full playlist in the description below. Game 9 means that we now have 2 players sitting at 3 wins, with both Jelly and Caleb on the cusp of taking home the gold. Derek and I are still struggling to catch up, with me at 2 and Derek at 0. We know that Golos and Talrand are on deck for the other 2, so let's go to the starting hands and see how Derek and I are going to deal with that. Last game didn't go so hot for Caleb and Golos, so he's back to try it again. His goal is to ramp out as fast as he can and play Golos, then make lots of mana to either try to combo out or just activate Golos as many times as possible. He'll have to mull to 6 and keep a starting hand with the Bloodstained Mire, Marsh Flats, Zagoth Triome, Swamp, Indatha Triome, and Castle Lochthwain. Jelly's last deck is Talrand, which is also the deck he's had the worst luck with so far. Jelly's aiming to get Talrand on the board and start disrupting the rest of the table, making a Drake army in the process. Jelly also has to mull to 6 and keeps a 1-lander with an Island, Pongify, Misdirection, Sapphire Medallion, Biden Athasa, and Squelch. With my tournament life on the line, I'll be breaking out Winota, Joiner of Forces. This is an aggressive deck that's looking to create non-human attackers to trigger Winota and roll out a mix of stacks pieces and heavy-hitting humans. The goal is to snowball out of control before my opponents have a chance to catch up. I'll be keeping a hand with 3 planes, Thalia, Heretic Cathar, Gingerbrute, Legion's Landing, and Generous Gift. Finally, with his back to the wall, Derek's going to go back to his signature deck in Murder Tribal with Toshiro Umezawa. Derek's bringing his most removal-heavy deck to try to react to whoever's the biggest threat until he's ready to take over the game. His opening hand includes 3 Swamps, Professor Onyx, Oubliette, Corpse Dance, and Blood Pact. Derek wins the pregame die roll, so he'll be going first. Derek gets the party started with a Swamp, then passes. Caleb will play a Bloodstained Mire, then crack it to get a Ketria Triome. I'll play a Plains as my land for turn, then tap it to cast a Legion's Landing. This will make me a Vampire token with lifelink, and then I'll pass. Jelly just plays an Island, and will be done after that. Derek plays another Swamp, and then passes. Caleb plays a Marsh Flats next, then cracks it, losing a life to get a Savai Triome. On my turn, I'll play another Plains, then go to combat and swing my token over a Jelly. I'll gain a life from the lifelink, then cast a Serra Ascendant before ending my turn. Jelly will play out his second Island, then cast a Sapphire Medallion. Back over to Derek, and since he's playing Murder Tribal, he's going to play a Swamp and then pass. Caleb plays another Triome with Indatha Triome, then cast a Sky Shroud Ranger. On my turn, I'll play a Gingerbrute, then go to combat. I'll swing the Gingerbrute and the token over at Jelly, and the Serra Ascendant at Caleb. The 3 attackers will transform my Legion's Landing into a Danto, and Jelly and Caleb can't block. In my second main phase, I'll play a Plains, then cast Thalia, Heretic Cathar. Jelly goes to his turn and misses a land drop, so he has to pass. At his end step, Derek will cast Blood Pact, losing 2 life to draw 2 cards. Back to Derek's turn, who plays another Swamp and then casts his commander, Toshiro Umezawa. Caleb will also play a Swamp on his turn, then cast Dread Presence. He'll tap his Sky Shroud Ranger to try to put a land into play, but Jelly will choose to cast Squelch to stop that from happening. On my turn, I'm also going to miss a land drop, so I'll go to combat and swing at the same targets. No one can block still, so damage will go through, and then I'll have to pass. Jelly still hasn't found a land for himself either, so he also has to pass. Over to Derek, and since there's no real threats on the board yet, he's going to bide his time and wait. He'll play an Arcane Lighthouse, which comes in tap because of Thalia. Caleb now has some more Triomes to play on his turn, so he'll play a Zagoth Triome. It's a Swamp, which will trigger the Dread Presence. He'll shoot Thalia for 2 and gain 2 life, and on the death trigger from Toshiro, Derek will recast Blood Pact. However, Jelly has other plans and casts Misdirection to allow himself to draw instead. With that exchange over, Caleb taps the Sky Shroud Ranger to drop down a Castle Lochthwain, then uses his open mana to cast Golos. He'll use the ETB trigger from Golos to fetch a Cabal Coffers and then pass. At his end step, I'll make another Vampire token with a Danto. Now on my turn, I'll miss another land drop, and then I'll cast Esper Sentinel, then go to combat, swinging at Jelly and Caleb again, and I'll throw the new token over at Jelly too. There are still no blocks available, so after damage, I'll pass. At my end step, Jelly will cast a Mystical Tutor, paying the 1 for Esper Sentinel, and he'll get a Preordain to the top of his library. On Jelly's turn, he'll draw that Preordain, then cast it, not paying the 1 this time, and allowing me to draw a card. He'll scry 2, and leave both on top, drawing 1, and then playing an island. Over to Derek's turn now, where he's going to play another Swamp. He'll then go ahead and tap to cast an Oubliette, paying the 1, and targets Golos to send him to the Shadow Realm. We thank Derek for his service, and at the end of Derek's turn, I cast a Generous Gift on Caleb's Cabal Coffers to pile it on some more. This destroys the Cabal Coffers, but it also means that it's time for Derek to try to make a token.
No!
This scratch out 8 elephant.
Oh, multi-purpose.
That's a word.
Let's go.
Now that Caleb's been knocked down a few pegs, he's going to go to his turn and cast AC, Tyrant of Gyra Strait. He'll drop a Field of the Dead as land for turn, triggering AC and triggering the field. Unfortunately, he doesn't see another land, so he'll pass. Now on my turn, I'll play a Jeweled Lotus. I'll crack it for red mana, and finally get to cast Winota. However, before combat, Jelly will cast Pogify to destroy Winota and give me a token. I'll go to combat anyway, choosing to make the same attacks as last time. On my second main phase, I'll play a Sunbaked Canyon as land for turn, then tap down my white mana to cast a Skyclave Apparition. I'll target Jelly's Sapphire Medallion in exchange for him destroying Winota. Back over to Jelly, who finds another island and then casts Curse of the Swine with X equals 2. He doesn't pay the 1, allowing me to draw, but he does target Esper Sentinel and AC to turn them into pigs. Derek is still taking it slow, so he'll play a Beseech the Queen, using it to tutor for a Cabal Coffers. He'll play the Cabal Coffers as land for turn, and then pass. On Caleb's turn, he'll play a Soul Ring, followed by a Chromatic Lantern. He'll then tap to cast a Ramunap Excavator, using it to replay Marsh Flats from his graveyard. This triggers Field of the Dead, making a zombie, and then he'll pass after that.
That was like a fucking panther. Hello? What is that?
Wasn't that Hotline Miami?
Yeah, that's a fucking pig mask from Hotline Miami.
That's the scariest shit I've ever seen. Get that to Derek. Man, I don't know if that board can handle that kind of depraved thing.
I'm glad we're in October because this is some scary ass shit.
Yeah, especially this 3-mouthed elephant.
This elephant looks like he's throwing out spaghetti right now.
Where's the other board going?
I have one already.
Oh, you hate your own board? Oh, we gotta be uniform, man. We gotta match out here, bro. Board.
See, the fact that like this was worth the $10 just to see how happy Derek's become.
Back to me now, and I'll play a Plains, then tap down to recast Winota. I'll go to combat, but before I get to do anything, Caleb will crack his Marsh Flats, getting a Swamp. This will trigger Field of the Dead and Dread Presence, which will let him shoot my Ginger Brute. He'll then use his open mana to cast Anguished Unmaking, losing 3 life to exile Winota. Since I still can't seem to stick my commander, I go to combat, swinging my tokens at Jelly and the Sarah Ascendant at Caleb. Neither of them can block still, and I'll have to pass after damage. At my end step, Derek will cast a Moonlight Bargain, choosing to take 4 cards into his hand. Jelly will play Mystic Sanctuary as his land for turn, which will let him put Mystical Tutor back to the top of his library. He'll then pass after that. On Derek's turn, he'll miss his land drop, but he'll cast Victim of Night to kill Kalo's Ramunap Excavator, then use Toshiro's trigger to recast the Victim of Night to kill the Dread Presence. He'll then cast a Tragic Slip to kill my Sarah Ascendant, then finish up the turn by casting a Shadow Spear. Caleb now goes to his turn, where he's drawn a Nature's Claim to destroy the Oubliette. This frees Golos from his prison, and so Caleb immediately activates him. He reveals the Deserted Temple, Nature's Lore, and Rampant Growth, and so he'll play the Deserted Temple as land for turn, getting a field trigger, then gets a Forest and an Overgrown Tomb from the ramp spells, getting 2 more triggers. Back to me, where I'll play a Plains and swing my tokens over at Jelly. He still can't block, and after damage, I'll play an Ornithopter and then pass. Jelly goes to his turn and draws his Mystical Tutor, then casts his commander Talrand and passes to Derek. We're still at a bit of a stalemate in this game, but Derek is finally ready to get things going. He'll equip his Shadow Spear and then go to combat, swinging Toshiro over at Jelly. After combat, he'll cast a Toxic Deluge, paying 2 life into it. This wipes out a good chunk of the board, and so Derek will pass after that. Caleb will now try to rebuild by activating Golos, revealing a Forest, an Oracle of Moldiah, and an All Is Dust. He'll go to combat first, swinging his elephant token at Jelly, and then he'll cast all his dust, causing everybody to sacrifice their colored permanents. This will put a Toshiro trigger on the stack, and Derek will use this trigger to cast Tragic Slip, targeting Golos to kill him. In response, Caleb will activate Golos again before he dies. This time he reveals a Yavimaya, Blasphemous Act, and a Diabolic Revelation. Caleb will now cast an empty Diabolic Revelation, cast Oracle Moldaya, and then play the Forest and Yavimaya. He gets 2 Field of Dead triggers here, but he'll remember to put the tokens out for that later. At the end of his turn, I'll make a token with a Danto. Now on my turn, I'll play a Plains and then tap down the cast Winota. This time she actually sticks, and so I'll go to combat, swinging my token at Jelly, getting a Winota trigger. This will let me put an Angrat's Marauders out, which swings at Caleb. He ends up blocking with a zombie, and I'll be done after that. At end of turn, Jelly will cast Mystical Tutor to go get an Aetherize to the top of his library. Now we're on to Jelly's turn, where he's just going to draw the Aetherize and then pass. Derek has to rebuild after the board wipe, so he's going to recast Toshiro and then pass. Over to Caleb, where he's going to play a Fetid Pool as his land for turn, followed by a Swamp. He'll now recast Golos, tutoring out of Asuva, which comes in as a copy of Field. The Oracle reveals the comma on top, and all of us start to sweat a little bit, and so Caleb's going to activate Golos, but Derek's going to respond by casting Snuff Out on Golos before we're all in big trouble. Golos is dead, but the effect still goes off, which reveals the Zakama, Assassin's Trophy, and Mutilate. Caleb will now float mana and then cast Zakama, but in response to the ETB trigger, Derek will cast Deadly Rollick to exile Zakama. Caleb will use his floating mana to activate Zakama to shoot my token, then Zakama gets exiled. Zakama's ETB now goes off, which untaps all of Caleb's lands. He'll then cast the Assassin's Trophy, targeting my Angrat's Marauders to destroy it and giving me a mountain untapped. Caleb then uses its untapped lands to now recast Golos, getting a Thespian stage, making 2 zombies off of the 2 fields. Although Caleb isn't pulling ahead just yet, he has a ton of mana and starting to look like a real problem. I go ahead and cast the Legion War Boss, followed by a Goblin Rabblemaster. I move to combat, but Caleb will respond first by casting Defile on Winota. But Jelly's going to intervene here, deciding to counter the Defile with the Swan Song, making Caleb a bird. I get to move to combat, now making 2 hasty Goblin tokens which swing over at Jelly. I whiff on 1 Winota trigger, and I find a Pia and Kieran Nalar with the second, making 2 Thopters at home. Pia and Kieran go at Caleb, who blocks with Golos. Unfortunately, that's all I can do for now, so I have to pass. Jelly still doesn't have anything to do on his own turn, so he has to pass. Of the 2 players on match point, it's fairly clear that Jelly isn't a threat, but Derek and I still have a big problem on our hands with Caleb. However, Derek claims to have a way to take him out of the game now, and so I agree to let him go through with whatever he needs to do. He'll start it off by playing a Professor Onyx and +1 her to look at the top 3 of his library, putting 1 in his hand. Derek will then cast Defile on Winota, getting a Magecraft trigger to drain everybody for 2. Winota dying will trigger Toshiro, allowing Derek to recast Snuff Out, targeting the Legion War Boss and draining everyone for 2 again. This triggers Toshiro again, and he chooses to recast Defile. With that trigger on the stack, he'll also cast Liliana's Triumph, getting a Magecraft trigger and causing all of us to sack a creature. We forget about the discard portion since we forgot that Professor Onyx is Liliana, and the Defile will resolve, killing the Goblin Rabblemaster. All the Magecraft triggers are enough to kill Caleb and take Jelly down to 1. The problem with Caleb is gone, but unfortunately it came at a cost. The only thing I can do on my turn is swing 2 Thopters over at Liliana and then cast an Aethersworn Canonist. Jelly was already on life support this game, and so he's going to play an island and then pass. Derek now goes to his turn, +1ing Lily to get a card and then equipping the Shadow Spear. He'll then cast Baleful Mastery on the Aethersworn Canonist for the discount cost, choosing to let Jelly draw a card since the Magecraft trigger will kill him anyway. Jelly will respond to the cast by casting Capsize on Professor Onyx, but then he'll die afterwards. This leaves just me and Derek left, and so he'll go to combat, swinging Toshiro over at me. I have no blocks, and so I'll take the commander damage. At the end of his turn, I'll make a token with a Danto. Back to me now, where I'll play a Soul Ring. It's a race to the finish, and so I'm going to swing my board out at Derek to try to kill him before he can whittle me down. However, before damage, Derek casts a Hellish Rebuke, causing me to sacrifice all of my creatures and take damage per creature. This was a huge blowout, and suddenly things aren't looking so good anymore. Derek now goes to his turn, and he'll swing Toshiro over at me again. I have no creatures to block, and so I take some more commander damage. Derek then plays a Deserted Temple, then recast Professor Onyx and +1s her to get a card. At Derek's end step, I'll make an Adanto token. Unfortunately, I don't have many good plays on my turn, and so I decide to empty pass. Derek will now cast a Stinging Study to draw 3 cards at my end step, triggering Magecraft as well. Derek plays a Swamp on his turn, then chooses to -3 Liliana. This forces me to sacrifice my token, and Derek will swing Toshiro in for another 3 commander damage. The clock is ticking and I'm running out of options, but I'll make another Adanto token at the end of turn. Finally, on my turn, I'll play out a Mana Crypt and then try to make some moves. I'll cast a Grand Abolisher, but Derek's going to respond by casting a Geth's Verdict on my token. At this point I realize that with both Professor Onyx available and Derek having significant card advantage, I'm fighting a losing battle, and so after giving it some thought, I decide to scoop it up. This means that Derek is finally going to be your winner for episode 9 of the Grand Tournament. It was a grind to get there, but Derek finally puts a win on the board with Toshiro. Derek definitely benefited from being the least threatening person at the table, which is something that the Toshiro deck hasn't had the luxury of being in all of its previous games. Caleb, Jelly, and I were all focused on stopping each other, which let Derek save all of his removal for the late game when he can go for a big play with Professor Onyx. He's still got a ways to catch up, but it's nice for him to finally break the losing streak. For me, Winota didn't have the best performance in her debut for this tournament, as I ended up lacking a red mana source for several turns, slowing down my game plan and preventing me from starting the snowball. Although I got the game down to a one-on-one situation, my board had been disrupted too many times for me to rebuild in a meaningful way before Derek was able to establish dominance. While I might have been able to play out a few more turns, it would have been a slow, painful death in an already long game, much like in Game 2. Caleb also had a much better game this time with Golos, but he always seemed to be about one turn away from really going off. We were able to deal with most of the threats he presented as they came up, and the Sarah Ascendant was able to put him down to low enough of a life total to where Derek could take him out before it was too late. If he's going to find a way out of this tournament, Caleb's going to need to find a way to take some of the heat off of himself or protect himself from getting beaten down. Finally, Jelly really just couldn't do much of anything with Talrand this game. While he was able to throw some removal and counter spells around, he otherwise had very little impact on the game thanks to getting land screwed early on. The only time he got Talrand out, he died immediately the turn after. It wouldn't have helped in this game, but one thing that Jelly still hasn't gotten to play in any of his Talrand games has been an effect like Coastal Piracy to really accelerate his deck. If he can stick one of those effects, he'll be in a much better position to try to take this last win. The big takeaway from this game is making sure you understand who the threats are at the table and picking your spots to make your presence known. In this tournament, there are some external factors that determine who the primary target should be, but at any table, you can read the other players and determine who are your enemies and who are people you can work with, even if you never explicitly say it. Derek put on a masterclass in this game, working with me to try to take Caleb down so he can leave himself with a favorable matchup of Toshiro versus Winota at the end. This just goes to show that even if your deck isn't the strongest at the table, you can always turn the odds in your favor with good politics and good decision making. Let's take a look at the scoreboard now to see where we're at. This first win is nice for Derek, but it doesn't change the fact that Caleb and Jelly both only need one more win to close it out. Will Derek and I live to see another day, or will Caleb and Jelly manage to get that last win? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and if you want to find out what happens next, make sure to like and subscribe to get notified when the next episode's out. That's going to be it for this episode, so thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.